Hello everybody. It is Wednesday the 19th of October. I want to talk about how Christianity, as it stands right now, is actually a mind virus that will destroy your spiritual immune system. And I want to show you why the book of Revelation is seemingly manifesting all around us, who is working it, and this is not worked on a spiritual level, but on a materialistic level. And I will also want to talk about how this destruction of our spiritual immune system, which is the knowledge of good and bad, our knowledge of good and bad, might lead to the outcome, which is the book of Revelation, and God forbid that it should. And that we really, first of all, must prevent that from happening, and that we must gain the correct understanding of what is happening and the correct understanding of ourselves, and then start to work it in the correct way. So let's start with the mind virus. Now, or rather the immune system. Now, spiritual immune system works very much like our own immune system in our body. That is, it lets in what is good for the body, and it rejects or destroys what is dangerous to the body. So if we go to the beginning and we look at Elohim, first of all, we had one God, and then he created others like himself. You could see that as a cell, that is starting to form a body, create a body. That body is clustered around an intention. The intention being to subdue nature, to rule over, and to have dominion over this world. Yeah? So, and they are all clustered according to that intention. They serve that intention. And their immune system, their knowledge of good and bad, is what serves the intention is good, and what is detrimental to the intention is bad. So that is their knowledge of good and bad. And yes, their immune system is functioning because when Adam and Eve started to think about good and bad for themselves, not according to the intention, but according to each other, they looked at each other. Yeah? That's a different system. That's a different way of defining good and bad. And with that, they became like a foreign body inside of the garden. They weren't functioning like everything else was functioning. And that is why the immune system of that garden ejected them. Now, that was the beginning of us. And we are now we have formed our own body of humanity, and our spiritual immune system, our knowledge of good and bad, should still function as it did at the beginning. That is to say, good and bad according to humanity is what is good and bad for each other. That is how it was from our beginning. And it should still be that, because that is us. So now with Jesus, a virus entered into our system, a thought that shouldn't be there. And the way it entered, and here is how do you get, well, first of all, where did the thought come from? And I would say it came from Elohim. So there 2 points connected. Elohim and Jesus were connected to each other. So how do 2 points connect that they can send a message to one another? It is they are the same in that point. They are the same. And the message that came, or the knowledge that came, was the knowledge of, ask and you shall be given, continuously give to one another, edify each other, strengthen the body. And in that, we are the same. It applies both to Elohim and to us. But, and here, as we know now, from our scientific knowledge, how do you get a foreign body in, without the body recognizing it? And that is, you wrap it into something that the body will recognize as good. And that was this message, That is, we recognize that as good. But it was a Trojan horse, because there were other thoughts inside of it. Again, the thought of, I will come and save you, but you must do according to what I tell you, to bring my kingdom to this world. And then our knowledge of good and bad really needs to be switched off. Jesus caught that virus and it led to his self-destruction. Which, again, it is a possibility contained within a human being that we will self-destruct. But, again, in our own sound judgment, we would say when that happens, the person wasn't of sound mind. Whereas Christians now shout, glory, hallelujah. Anyway, what a great thing to do. But there you can see where our knowledge of good and bad is being affected. But that was the mind virus. I will save you, but you must do according to what I tell you. And Jesus was an open door. He said anything can enter in, all can enter in. He was no longer thinking for himself, but he went into parrot mode, repeat after me and say nothing else. And as for his emotional knowing, see, that's the 2 parts where we know good and bad, rationally or in our emotions. Well, he said, chuck doubt and fear. If they want to talk to you, they're bad. Chuck them into the bottomless pit and put a lid on them. And with that, our immune system is destroyed. We can no longer reason good and bad for ourselves. And you can see it reflected in Christians now. Yeah? Either they cannot reason good or bad at all, or they are actually in a duality right now. Yeah? Where they will judge the same thing in 2 different ways. And that is, for instance, when God says, my 2 witnesses will come and smite the earth with plagues as often as they like. And Christians go, yes, when are the witnesses coming? Power to the witnesses, yeah? But when it's actually happening in this world, well, it's happening now. We are being, plagues getting thrown at us from somewhere. And they would say that's bad. So there they are actually now in a duality, where if it's God, it's good. But if it's something else, it's bad. There's a separation of heaven and earth. If it's bad on earth, it's still good in heaven. One rule for heaven and another rule for here. And again, one rule for them and for us another. In this world, we would fight that tooth and nail, but if it comes to the Bible, it's suddenly good. So how did we get into this confusion? Or how did this virus actually spread? this teaching, and it spread through Rome in a big way. With Rome, it took off. So, and what happened there, and that is why I said what's happening at the moment is happening on a materialistic level. Because what happened there is the rational mind got hold of that teaching. Those that were or think themselves illuminated, because they are totally rational and they have rational knowledge, science. But basically they're only firing on one cylinder. But they think themselves illuminated. And at the beginning with Rome, when they looked at that text, and again, what is elevated out of that text is according to yourself. It always happens, you read according to yourself. So what elevated out of that text for them was, well, there was a God with superior knowledge, yeah, and it would turn those that go that path into a subservient creature that will full on accept authority and do according to it, and will no longer reason good and bad according to itself. And yeah, you can make them do just about anything. And of course that served Rome. That idea served Rome. So they used that teaching, they created the church, the Roman Catholic Church. And that teaching was preached to all, and they created this subservient creature, Christians. Now, it's on a higher level, because they have learned, and here is the Hur, the rational mind, the scientific mind, riding the spiritual beast and getting rich. And they are the ones now that can see the Spirit, and they acknowledge the Spirit, but they don't acknowledge the power thereof. They don't believe on the power thereof. That's who is there at the moment. Where they have cracked the code that I've been talking about. They no longer look at this book as pictures, but they see the meaning. Yeah? And they acknowledge the Spirit. Yeah? To, like when I said in my videos, you know, when you talk about the serpent and the woman, that is actually the picture of the doubt creeping into the rational mind. They are on that level of knowledge, but they are still understanding, that is. But they are still only going as far as a rational mind will allow them to go. So they acknowledge the Spirit, as in that they acknowledge that a person could have an intuitive knowledge of himself, of his biology and of his psychology. But they will not go any further. They are not believing on the power, which means that this is not just the knowledge of yourself, but something that you can work outside of yourself, that you can work energies to manipulate this reality. And I think they also do not believe on that there might be something else out there that we were actually connected to. That is then going into the realm of spooky stuff. And you know, Einstein's spooky stuff. And they're not going there. But they're just taking the knowledge, unlocking the code of the book, taking the knowledge and working it purely on the level of psychology and of biology to manipulate us even further, to get more power over us. Yeah. So, but as they are working this, and we see it manifesting in this world, they are building images, which obviously then in the Christians really strengthens their belief. You know, we are in the book of Revelation. Yeah? And the blessed hope will manifest in the end. Which, you know, if you were of sound mind, you would know that none of this is good. And that it was there to rule over you. But again, I mean, there's pastors even seen that. But they're still on this dualistic thing, you know, if it's good, if it's God ruling over you, it's good. If something else ruling over you is bad. So, and I'm wondering, because this is, as I said, it is a rational mind riding a powder keg. Yeah? Because if you do believe on the power thereof, as I do, then the more Christians are being driven into that corner, they could perform a spiritual act, not knowing what it is they're doing and completely void of the knowledge of good and bad. And that would be actually the heavens opening and the armies of heaven coming to earth or whatever, when that is actually happening, when that becomes a reality through a spiritual act of asking and receiving. As I said, in the Creator there is no judgment, and the Christians are void of judgment, but they are spiritual beings, and they might work a spiritual act. And I mean, I looked at that this morning. There are 2.2 billion Christians in this world. 2.2 spiritual creatures that may have spiritual powers, that don't know what they're doing and are void of the knowledge of good and evil. I mean, there are those that are saying, and maybe the powers that be are even going so far now as to say that there is another dimension to all of this. And here is where we really use the word dimension in the correct way, in the correct place, attached to what is happening and not way out there. So this other dimension, the spooky stuff, might exist. They might become afraid at the moment, you know, that it could actually happen. Because dimension, and I looked it up this morning, it is an aspect or feature of a situation. And they might, you know, say there is an aspect to this situation that we have denied up to now. But it might be real. Now the way, again, there's those saying that they will create an image. Yeah? A deception. Where something is coming and the Christians will accept that as, you know, the fulfillment of the revelation. And if they do, you know, when they think it has already happened, they will not spiritually bring it about because they think they're already in it. That might be something they're trying to do because, as I said, they're sitting on a powder keg. And I think they're beginning to realize that that is what is happening. Because if Christians would actually work that on a spiritual level, and then we would be at the place where Paul said those that led into captivity, which they did lead us into, they created this creature, this subservient creature, and the belief. I mean, they even left the book of Revelation there at the end as the blessed hope. That was kind of a sick joke, really. But they left it. And now they're starting to go further than just, it's just an intuitive knowledge of ourselves, and they're starting to think about what if the spooky stuff is actually real. Anyway, I think that is where we're at. So where do we go from here? First of all, we need to have the correct knowledge of good and bad. I mean, that is, our immune system needs to function again. We need to be of sound mind again. Yeah? I mean, as for myself, if I look at the book of Revelation, yeah, and I see the two witnesses smiting the world with plagues as often as they like, for me, that is bad. I know it in this world. I know it as a human being. I know it to be bad, and I don't care who's doing it. It doesn't change because, God is doing it. To me, it doesn't change. It's still bad. And that is my knowledge of good and bad. So we must stand in our own truth. We must stand in our own truth. And we're not saying, you're just a village idiot and you just don't know. You just don't understand how all, destruction and plagues and famines, and you don't understand how that is all good. It's not. Standing in your own truth, none of that is good, and there's no possibility of it becoming good. So that is what we must do first. And secondly, as I go back to the teaching and to the power of the Spirit, to the power of prayer, because that is what Jesus taught. He did not actually teach the heavens opening and I think the book of Revelation was a warning, because he went to the outcome and he saw it going belly up. Yeah? And realized his mistake. I mean, he must have realized his mistake at the point of death, because the veil broke. I think it's a warning. Again, read that correctly. But then go back to what he actually taught, about the healings, about the feeding, the resurrection of the dead, and all of those things. That was the truth that we recognized as he recognized as truth, as that a human being could recognize as truth and as good, truly good. You don't have to bend yourself out of shape to think that that is good. So that is what we must concentrate on if we want to go to a higher level. That is the way. That is what we must concentrate on. That is the knowledge we must find, how to work it correctly and work it and become a spiritual being that is doing spiritual works in the correct way. Anyway, I think that is where we're at. That is the way how we got here, by the rational mind. The rational mind creating this creature that is subservient and will do because it would serve them. They thought they could work that so they could rule over. And not, as I said, they didn't. They recognized the Spirit, but they denied the power thereof. And that is, we are sitting on a powder cake. If you believe on the power of the Spirit, then we are sitting on a powder cake. And we really must do something about it. Anyway, I leave it at that for today. Now, as I said, everything, if we read these texts, if we think about it, it's elevated according to ourselves. And this is what I am seeing as truth. And I'm standing by it. But it is for you to discern whether you think that is truth. looking at it through the eyes of yourself as a human being. If you think this is truth, then please share these videos. And if you want to donate to my channel, the donate button is on my homepage, and every little bit will be appreciated. Trust me. Anyway, I leave it at that for today, and I talk to you again soon. Bye.